Hey everybody, how are you? Welcome to the MenoLounge. I'm Julie Gordon-White, CEO of Bossa Bar, soon to be Meno Well. Did I say that? I said it. The reason why I said that is if you haven't seen, we have BOGO happening on bossabars.com. Buy one, get one free. I just want to let you know while they last as we get ready for our brand new packaging. We're super excited. So make sure you hop over there and grab something different today. It's not going to be food. I can't wait to talk about this conversation. Super important. As a mother of three, I cannot wait to have Kim on with us today because all the things, Kim, all the things we're going to talk about today. How are you? Welcome to the Middle Lounge.
I'm well. How are you?
Always great. This is my most fun time of the week to have these great conversations. So, Kim Vopni, welcome. Super glad you're here. You have the most amazing coaching name on the planet. We normally are talking about food and fitness and nutrition, although we talk about everything on the MenoLounge. But today we're going inside, really inside. And it's such an important topic. So many friends of mine, my mom who's in her 80s still talking about this. I've had 3 kids. Then you get to menopause and like jumping on the trampoline and dribble, dribble, dribble. That it's just a thing. So let's crack it open today. Kim, AKA the Vagina Coach. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you and your audience about a topic that doesn't get enough attention that it deserves, and it's really something that pretty much affects every single one of us, and so many of us suffer in silence and don't know that there's help, and are often told by media that it's just part of being a woman. And as you mentioned, that jumping on the trampoline, and we can joke about these things because they're so common, but they're very treatable, and we don't have to live with pads and thinking that we have to leak for the rest of our life.
And it can be very devastating for women too, who don't know how to handle leakage and all the things related to it. And it's almost like it feels like, even though it's not, a subset of menopause. Like menopause is already a thing that we're just starting to talk about, and this is like even something even more secretive that women don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
So first of all, let's just talk. How did you land in this space, and how did you land in becoming the Vagina Coach, which is so awesome?
Yeah. It was sort of, I say accidentally on purpose, in a sense. Like I kind of had this fascination, but also fear of pregnancy and childbirth from a young age when I saw a childbirth video in sex ed. And then I was asking my mom about her childbirth experiences. And my mom was an OR nurse. She was very open with anything to do with body. Like she was amazing. And I look back and it was cringy at the time because my brother and I had to sit and listen to these sex talks with my mom, but I really applaud her and thank her for being so transparent and open with us. But that's kind of where the seed was planted. And then when I decided I wanted to start a family, I was really determined to have a different story than my mom, who it was routine to have episiotomies where they cut part of the pelvic floor. That's just what they did. And then it was, again, common that you leak and then you have surgery for it. And, that was just sort of the life cycle. And I really didn't want to take part in that. So when I was pregnant, my midwives had recommended a product to me called the Epino, which is a biofeedback device from Germany. And it helps you connect with your pelvic floor, learn how to contract and relax. It helps provide some of the sensations that you'll feel during childbirth so that you can train your pelvic floor how to react and respond appropriately. Super logical, great product, had a great experience. And then I said, why is it that not every single person who's giving birth is using one of these? And I contacted them and said, I'm in Canada, could I be a distributor? And that's how it started. And it wasn't supposed to be a business. It was just going to be this little side thing. And as I was talking about this, and I started a website and I was selling this, and I started adding other pelvic health products, I started to learn about pelvic floor physical therapy. And then again, I was screaming from the rooftops, why is it that not every single woman, especially women who are giving birth, not seeing a pelvic floor physio as like part of our annual health checkup? And so initially I was working primarily with pregnant women in terms of prevention. Then I was recognizing postpartum recovery as a time that was really overlooked and we could make some change there. So I formed a second business called Bellies Inc. and we manufactured our own recovery wrap, coupled that with exercise. And then that's kind of what I did for a number of years. But then my own personal self, plus my two business partners, we were starting to go into perimenopause. And one of us had a hysterectomy and, and started to learn about this menopause time of our life. And we said, pelvic health is really not just do your Kegels in pregnancy. This is a full life journey. We have all sorts of things that influence at various life stages. So it really started, I was a personal trainer. I got out of that for a while. And then I started selling this product. And then I recertified in fitness and combined the principles of fitness with the pelvic floor, which is a group of muscles that nobody talks about. And we need to train them just like we train our biceps or our quads.
That's amazing. I mean, you said two things that really struck me. One, I did not realize that when you have an episiotomy, that's part of the pelvic floor that is cut. I have no idea. I have three children, so clip, clip, clip. And then yes, muscle, and yeah, we don't go to the gym. There's no piece of equipment, or maybe there is. I don't know. Maybe you're going to tell us there's a piece of equipment that can help us strengthen that muscle. So this is really, really exciting. And I love how your business and your expertise has followed through your own life and needs, right? And now that perimenopause is upon you, like, oh, wow, now this thing continues on. And so for many of us women who maybe experience some of these things when we are having children, then maybe it's lessened. And then here we are, we get to perimenopause or menopause, and oh my gosh, in addition to dryness and all the other things, we have other leakage and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to how we can help women, because I know there are women here who are really struggling, don't want to talk to their doctors, don't want to talk to their friends. So Kim, we're going to give them the 411 today. Is that good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Good. Well, let's hop in. So I would love to just kind of launch into some tips, or if you want to start with a story of, one of your clients that maybe was perimenopausal, really struggling, and how you worked with her and maybe that experience. Then we can give them some tips that they can really apply right away. Mm-hmm. Sound good?
Yeah, a couple things just before I jump into a story. You mentioned earlier that menopause is upon us, and now we have this other subcategory of pelvic health. And what has happened? So I've been working in pelvic health now for 19 years, and over the last 3 to 5, it has really skyrocketed in terms of people talking about it, way more awareness. Then also in the last kind of 1 to 2 years, as you know, menopause exploded, and that indirectly played a role in the conversation of pelvic health happening even more, because we have GSM, genitourinary syndrome of menopause, which under that big umbrella of a name, we have incontinence, we have organ prolapse, we have vaginal dryness, we have vaginal atrophy, we have pelvic pain, we have chronic UTI. So anything that can influence our pelvis is sort of lumped under this basket of GSM. That is, as you mentioned, a subcategory of what the other symptoms are that we're dealing with menopause. So I just kind of wanted to plant that seed.
I love it.
The other thing, so kind of coming into the story, I'm now myself, my official menopause, my 1 year of menopause was a year ago. So I'm post-menopause, haven't had a period for 2 years. I love it.
Welcome to the club. Yeah.
And I have had 2 children. I've birthed 2 children vaginally, but the story I'm going to tell is of a client of mine who has never been pregnant, never given birth, because it's important for me to say that you can experience any of those symptoms that I talked about, the incontinence, prolapse, pelvic pain, vaginal dryness, atrophy. You can experience any and all of those, even if you have never been pregnant or given birth at any point in your life. So I want to kind of remove that. And even if you maybe have been pregnant, you gave birth via cesarean, you can still also have these issues. So I want to take out, you don't have to have been pregnant at any point to experience this. So
I appreciate you saying that, because we want to make sure everyone's included, because not everybody gives birth. And I've noticed it's in the comments, someone said, yes, that's me. And someone else said, I'm jealous, which I'm pretty sure was referring to being post.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's yes. But so on that note, perimenopause was a bit of a struggle, but I became very educated. And I think all the things that I learned through that struggle have set me up now that I'm not struggling now. And I'm being very proactive from a pelvic health, but also whole body perspective as well. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this client of mine, when she came to me, she was 65. So I mentioned she's never been pregnant. So she was 15 years post menopause. She had chronic back pain. She had stress urinary incontinence, meaning she leaked a little bit of urine with exertion. She also had urges, so she felt like she couldn't make it to the bathroom in time whenever she did feel like she had a need to go. So she was peeing before she left the house. She would pee as she got to the golf course. She would pee at 9 holes. She would pee she finished. She would pee before she left the golf course. She would pee again as she got home. And she just said, my whole life is planned around my bladder, and I really hate this back pain that I have, and this is all interfering with my golf. That was her main thing, is she plays a lot of golf. And her most significant motivator was her mom, who was wearing Depends and in a nursing home. She said, I do not want to end up like my mother. Please help me. So we, first thing I recommended, she see a pelvic floor physical therapist. That's my number one tip, hands down. If you only take one thing away from this talk, make an appointment with a pelvic floor physical therapist, even if you have no symptoms.
Wait a minute. There's such thing as a pelvic floor physical therapist. Where do you find such wonderful person?
So you can just go to good old Google and put in your city or your town or the closest major city and pelvic floor physical therapy, or physiotherapy as it's called in Canada, and see what comes up. You can also look at the American Physical Therapy Association. You can also look at the Canadian Physiotherapy Association. You can also look at pelvicguru.com. That's a listing of not just physical therapists, but a bunch of pelvic health professionals. None of those are exhaustive, but that's a great place to, I always start with Google and then go elsewhere. But yes, so these are physio or physical therapists who have additional training in the pelvic floor, and they are licensed to evaluate and treat beyond the entrance to the vagina. So there is internal evaluation and assessment, provided with your consent, of course. So it doesn't have to include that, but it is a really valuable part of the assessment. So that's number one thing. I recommend that every single woman see one, even if you have no symptoms, but especially if you do, and see one once a year. Just like we go to the dentist once or twice a year for a checkup, and we go, if we don't have a toothache, we're going to go see our pelvic floor physical therapist, even if we don't have any symptoms of anything going wrong.
Now that's self-care. That's what I would call self-care. You know, that's an appointment that we don't ever think of having, but we absolutely should. And it shouldn't be like some necessarily a response, to an issue that you're having. We can get ahead of that. That is amazing. I love it.
I love prevention. So it's never too late. Even if you were 85, you can still go to a pelvic floor physical therapist and receive treatment and make change.
Okay,
but if we can be
what if you don't have any symptoms though, Kim? Maybe you've had babies or haven't had babies. You don't have any leakage, no issues. Still go. Not too early. It's never. Like, when do you, when you say, when do you start having a colonoscopy? Oh, like when should we have that appointment with the pelvic floor physio?
Well, so if I think back, I believe we should be teaching pelvic health in schools when we're teaching kids about menstrual health, sexual health, body education. We need to plant the seed of how important this group of muscles is, and how the female body goes through so many different life stages and hormonal fluctuations and all of these things that influence that group of muscles. And these are the professionals that help us. So we should be planting the seed there, but that's not happening yet. It probably won't happen for a really long time. But in the meantime, if we have daughters, I would be recommending, I have 2 sons, but if I had daughters, I would be recommending that they go around the time they're starting to become sexually active. Which they're maybe not always going to tell me that, but I would be having conversations with my daughters to educate them about pelvic health along the way. And that would be my recommendation. So at least they know. They can still be private. They don't have to tell me, but at least they can know who they would go and see. So that's when I recommend, if you're way past that, I recommend that today is a good time to go, or tomorrow.
Yesterday was the best, and today. Yeah. I love that. And I will be forwarding this video to my 24-year-old daughter for sure.
Amazing.
So.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love it. Good. Okay,
so
wonderful.
That was the first tip that I recommended for her to do. The next was, I took a look at her posture. I looked at how she was breathing. I talked a little bit about what are some of her habits dietary wise, and we talked about the going before she left the house, going at there. So she was adopting a strategy that a lot of people do when they have leaking and urgency, is they go pee all the time to try to empty their bladder so that there's not going to be anything to leak out, or so that they're not going to have an urge. So they're preemptively voiding. So the bladder usually would signal you when it's full, but if we're emptying always at this point, it's going to become trained to signal you at this point. So we are we're kind of training our bladder to signal us more often. And during that, we're often, well, if I don't drink anything, then I'm not going to leak, or then I won't have the urges. So we stop, we're not hydrated. And concentrated urine that is not well hydrated is more irritating to the bladder. So it's going to signal us more often and more strongly. So getting her to drink more water.
So the things that we think we're doing to solve this issue is actually making it worse, correct?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had her start tracking her water and drinking more. And that was also helping with the constipation that she had. So constipation also contributes to urgency and incontinence. So that helped solve that. Then we started working on, okay, we used a bladder diary, and a bladder diary helps her realize how often she's going to pee. And normal voiding is every 2.5 to 4 hours. So if you're peeing every half an hour to an hour and you haven't had a huge volume of liquid, what's the reason? Is it because you are preemptively voiding? Is it because you've had maybe a bladder irritant? Is it because you haven't had enough water? So you start to learn some of these things that are contributing to some of the challenges. So that was kind of the lifestyle piece. I also recommended she visit her doctor and get on local vaginal estrogen. So she did that. And
how does that make it impact, Kim?
So within the pelvis, so this is the pelvis.
Oh, good. We have show and tell. All right.
This is looking kind of, if we were inside looking from the top down, you can see the pelvic bowl. And then if on the outside, this would be a person laying down on their back. Here's the anus. Here's the vulva. Here's the vaginal opening and the urethra and the clitoris, the important clitoris. And here, this would be the perineal body. So if anybody's experienced any tearing or episiotomy, it's typically here. And this red, all of the red here is the multiple muscles. So it's not just one muscle, it's 3 different layers of multiple muscles woven within our pelvis that have the important jobs of continence, organ support, pelvic and spinal control and stability, sexual response, working like a sump pump with our diaphragm to help move stuff through our body. So those are really important jobs. The other thing that's interwoven in the pelvis is we have these estrogen receptors in the walls of the vagina, around the bladder, and they love estrogen. When we have lots of circulating estrogen, it helps keep the tissues supple and juicy and doing all the expansion and contraction that it can do for various things throughout the day, throughout our lives. As we stop producing, like we're declining the estrogen production, eventually halting, those estrogen receptors are kind of, they're looking, there's nothing for them to grab onto. And eventually what happens is the tissues then become thinner and drier without that estrogen there to keep them kind of resilient and bouncy and juicy. And thinner, drier tissues can become quite painful, irritated. Maybe there's some bleeding. The walls of the vagina can start to narrow. Insert of sex may become difficult or painful, not pleasurable. Like the clitoral hood, we can have clitoral atrophy as well. So things just look different. They feel different without estrogen. Yeah. The other thing that happens is those annoying leaks that we've maybe had a little bit, the urges that we've had a little bit, they become even more pronounced without that estrogen there. So when we can insert estrogen and make the tissues help them regain that resilience and buoyancy that we're looking for, urgency, incontinence, stress urinary incontinence, and all the other symptoms that I talked about can sometimes go away completely or be drastically reduced. So that's huge.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Well, and shout out to the topical estrogen, because it's a game changer. You know, I didn't take HRT. My mom had a hysterectomy. So when I went into perimenopause, she was like, do not take any hormones. So of course now we know that probably wasn't great advice, but at the time that was what she told me. So, but when I got to the sandpaper feeling, you know, dry as a Mojave Desert, had to do something about that. So that topical estrogen is a game changer for so many reasons. Now, I say that because she, and I hope she doesn't mind, she's not on Instagram, so she won't know I'm about to tell all of her business here, but, you know, struggles with leakage. And so is she in her 80s at 82? Can she use a topical estrogen that would help maybe with that. What do you think?
Yeah,
Yes.
1,000%. So it's never too late. It might take a little bit longer for her to notice some changes, but you can absolutely. So the recommendations now from, from all the evidence and from the many evidence-based doctors that I follow, around the age of 45, it's recommended for women to start local vaginal estrogen, and all indications right now are for us to be on it for the rest of our life. Of course, if we start later than that, it's better late than never, but yes, you can. So there's vaginal estrogen that can be in a cream. It could be in a tablet. It could be in a little ring that's a slow dose or slow release. It's up to you. And there's also vaginal DHEA. So some people, if they don't like the estrogen for whatever reason, vaginal DHEA. I really like Jolva by Dr. Annika Becca, which is an amazing DHEA cream. There's also Intra Rosa, which you can get through your doctor. And there's also then vaginal moisturizers. So a vaginal moisturizer will not replace what the estrogen is doing. I feel there's a place for both.
Mm-hmm.
But even sooner than age 45, we could be using vaginal estrogen with hyaluronic acid. So I like the one called Feel Amazing. There's one by Reverie. There's lots of them out there, but get
and
one
Pharma
specific
has a
for the
great
vagina.
one. Right.
Yeah.
There's so many wonderful vaginal moisturizers out there. So yes, I agree. Like the combination is a winner. So, but I just have to say, and Dr. Kelly, she always says this too, you don't have to suffer. And honestly, I feel like I put myself through some suffering for a while there that I did not need to do because I was so nervous about any hormones anywhere, period. No period.
There is like with local vaginal estrogen, meaning inserted into the vagina, there is zero link to any cancers of any kind, zero link to any heart conditions of any kind. It's incredibly safe, and we have tons of data to support that.
Yeah.
And it's not the same as the creams that you may rub on your hand or oral hormone therapy. It's different. And I believe that there's a place for us to potentially like really all be on it, and it can really make a significant difference. So that was another tip that I gave her. And then we got to the exercise. So
can I ask you one question? Looks like Baja MC Betty, if I said that right. What if you have an allergy to synthetic estrogens? Because I think that could be really helpful to a lot of people.
So the term synthetic is like some people think of synthetic meaning chemical. And then there's bioidentical hormones, as people will say natural, but bioidentical hormones that are, FDA approved or Health Canada approved are still synthetic. They are still manufactured in a lab. So I think I'd have way more questions about what you're actually allergic to, and you can speak to your physician about that. There are compounded versions, and compounded means that the compounding labs are taking specific doses of the hormone, and FDA and Health Canada approved would be a specific dosage, whereas compounding you can get more. Potentially, you just need a slightly more tailored dose. But so I have more questions on that. I think that's a bigger conversation.
It's hard to answer those questions in general. So very generally speaking. Yeah. But that's good information and food for thought to take back to
and
your
then I would
doctor.
say that person, then there's the vaginal DHA and vaginal moisturizer as options that I would recommend. So
those two.
Okay, so now I'll get to the exercise piece, which I know is kind of the main point of this topic.
But that's okay. This is also good, Kim. It's all the main point. So keep going.
So if you remember when I was saying and describing the pelvis, the pelvic floor, it's a group of muscles. And we have slow twitch fibers and fast twitch fibers, just like I have in my bicep, just like I have in my quadricep, my hamstring. It's a group of muscles. And we benefit from training that group of muscles as we do the muscles in our entire body. I've been a personal trainer for a cajillion years, and never in any of the courses and certifications that I had taken has the pelvic floor ever been talked about. And it is arguably the most important group of muscles that we have and should be learning about. It's the foundation of our core.
Wow.
So
you mean if I figure out how to exercise my muscles down there, then I don't have to do any more crunches and all the other things? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't want to take away from any, like, there's benefit to a variety of different exercises, but when we understand how to activate and like how to harness our pelvic floor, that's the best core exercise we can do. And we can turn many other exercises into core exercises. And we can often generate more power. We can lift more. We can run farther. We can, we can just do more because we have more support and more. That's where our power comes from.
Where have you been all my life? That's really what I want to know too. This is so good.
My client, I looked at her posture. I looked at her breathing. I looked at how she moved. Excuse me. And then I taught her how to connect with her pelvic floor, how to do a Kegel, but how to coordinate that Kegel with breathing and with movement. So that's the other piece. Most of us have probably been told at some point in our life, you should do your Kegel exercises. Right. And that is kind of the one exercise we think of. And there is evidence, we have loads of evidence that Kegels are effective. They're effective when they're done correctly and when they're done consistently. But we also have evidence to show that the majority of women do them incorrectly. And that's not our fault because nobody's ever taught us. Nobody's ever shown us.
You don't have a baby or go for a pelvic exam and they say, okay, today we're going to show you how to do your Kegels correctly, right?
Yeah, nobody. Okay. No, and that's another reason why pelvic floor physical therapy is so essential. That's kind of like the gold standard to assess if you're doing it correctly or not. Mm-hmm. So I have a video on my YouTube channel called The Core Breath, and that will go into kind of elaborate a little bit on terms of what I'm going to do here just from a time perspective. But here's our vulva. Here's our labia majora, labia minora, clitoris, urethra, vaginal opening, and down here we would have our anus. Okay. So when we think about a Kegel exercise, a lot of people think about like, I'm squeezing, like that we have to squeeze the openings shut.
I'm doing it now.
That is a component. There is a closure that we need. But there's also a lift. So if you can imagine me right now, I'm sitting. I think you're sitting as well. So ideally when we're sitting, our vulva would be on the surface of our chair, not our tailbone. We want to make sure that we nod our pubic joint forward and have our vulva on the surface of the chair. Okay. If I was to do a Kegel exercise, the motion would not just be squeezing. It would be like a come together or drawing together and a lift. So the cueing that I use, think about sipping a smoothie through a straw with your vagina. Okay, there's one. Think about picking up a blueberry with your vagina and your anus. Think about so if you have something inserted, it could be a finger, toy, penis. Think about drawing that penis or item close deeper into you. And then we want to make sure that we let that go. And the just clenching, a lot of people will clench their glutes and they'll kind of do this on a chair, or they'll squeeze their inner thighs, or they'll even bear down, like kind of holding their breath and bearing down, thinking they're doing a Kegel. But we have to really bring our area of focus closer in and think about some cueing that will have us. I also think of the jellyfish image, which is sort of what we want to apply.
That's good. Yeah.
And so when we coordinate, when we inhale, that's when the pelvic floor relaxes and lengthens. And when we exhale, that's when it contracts and lifts.
Oh, I would do that the opposite direction. So
most people do.
Because letting go feels like exhale to me versus pulling up. Okay, so it's the opposite. Should we all do that right now? Make that face.
So sit where you are, wherever you are right now. And I want you to sit with a neutral pelvis, which would mean your vulva. So remember, here's your vulva. I want your vulva to be on the surface of your chair. Okay. And that means your hip bones and your pubic joint are in the same plane, and you should have a gentle curve in your low back here. So when you take a breath in, also think about your ribs. So think about your ribs expanding, like making your bra strap wider. Soften your belly. Make sure your belly's not hugged in. Just let your belly be soft. And then think about your vulva. And I want you to blossom and like think of your labia like lungs, and you're going to inflate your labia lungs, or you can imagine blossoming your vulva
while you're breathing in,
while you're taking a breath in. So that should also feel like you have like a sense of fullness on your chair. Okay, so inhale, expand the ribs, soften the belly, blossom your vulva. Then when you exhale, purse your lips on your face and think about picking up a blueberry with your vagina and your anus. And then inhale, let your blueberries go. Exhale.
That takes a little bit of thinking. Does that seem the opposite, or is it just me?
No, you're like 99% of the population. Okay. Every single person, like I run a monthly challenge, the most common comment is, I've been breathing opposite. I've been doing this the wrong way. Yeah. And it does take a little bit of time, right? And it's sort of like, obviously we're not breathing incorrectly. We're alive and we're all breathing. But in terms of what we're trying to do is we're trying to harness the physiological relationship between the diaphragm and the pelvic floor. Inhales, pelvic floor relaxes. Sorry, I'll get back in the screen. Exhales, pelvic floor contracts and lifts. So this is happening throughout the day as we're moving around. If I'm constantly sitting in a tucked pelvis, if I'm stressed and afraid, if I have a lot of scar tissue, it can interfere with the movement of the pelvic floor in relationship to the diaphragm. And that in and of itself can be a contributor to problems. So tight, people think tight is strong, but if we have tightness, it doesn't allow for blood flow and circulation, and we can't generate as much power. So we need that relaxation. Almost a lot of people need to focus on it even more. So with my client, I taught her the core breath, which is what we just did in a very short, succinct time. And then you coordinate it into movement. So you have to get the coordination first of your breath and your pelvic floor. And then, so we're sitting on a chair. You could think about what's like me standing up and sitting down on a chair is like a squat. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So now if I want to think about how I want the pelvic floor to, and it does, engage just before exertion. That's what should be happening. It anticipates our movement and it engages just before we move. So just before
like any muscle contracts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if I'm sitting here on the chair, I'm going to inhale and blossom my vulva. My belly is expanding, my ribs expand. Then I'm going to exhale and I'm going to pick up my blueberries. Then I'm going to stand up, hold your blueberries up. Starting to stay in the camera here. Then I inhale as I sit back down. Exhale, pick up your blueberries. Now stand up, keep your blueberries up. Inhale, let the blueberries go and sit back down. So that's that's a very like quick example, but what that does is it trains the pelvic floor dynamically in movement. If we are just doing static Kegel, sitting in a chair, squeeze, relax, squeeze, relax.
Stoplight.
Really boring. Yeah. But also, I leak when I do this. So how is me sitting in a chair, contracting and relaxing, going to help me here? I need to train the pelvic floor to react to this movement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
wow. Yeah. So many amazing insights there that I've never ever heard of those things before. And having 3 kids, talked a lot about all things related, and wow, super generous of you to share and give that exercise that I know is going to make a huge difference for so many women. Good. And so any other tips you've got stuck in there? And I want to ask you about how nutrition also helps our vagina be healthier. If you got some thoughts on that. So
so with just kind of wrapping up my client, she within the first month of us working together, so we had a session. I told her to go see the physio, get vaginal estrogen. Here's some exercises to do. We met again a couple weeks later. So I met her twice within 1 month, and her back pain and her leaking was reduced by the 1 month mark. She carried on, and I was progressing her, giving her more repetitions, giving her more demanding exercises, still coordinating the core breath with it. And by 3 months, she wrote me back after. So we did sessions, then she went and did the work on her own. And by 3 months, she was leak-free, didn't have any pads that she was wearing anymore, no more back pain. It was totally gone. But so the point is that I want to say, to wrap it up, is change can happen very quickly. Usually within 2 weeks to a month, people will notice some sort of change if they are consistent and if they're doing it correctly. And then they think, okay, well, great, now I'm cured. And they'll stop doing it. So when we don't have the symptoms to remind us of the problem, we often then be like, great, it's done. I'm good. But this is, if we don't do it, it will come back.
It's a muscle, right? And it can become weak, just like any other muscle that we're not working.
Yeah. So consistent. So pelvic floor physical therapy, local vaginal estrogen, vaginal DHEA, vaginal moisturizer are all helpful. Daily pelvic floor exercise as a whole body movement approach, and 10 minutes a day is all it takes. We don't need a huge extra workout. We can incorporate it into our existing workouts. Resistance training is so important for women. And once we have established the foundation in our pelvic floor, we need to add resistance, because just like the rest of the muscles in our body, it responds to load and it gets stronger with load. And then I'll answer questions you have about nutrition as well. So those are kind of the
how do we add load to our pelvic floor? That's an interesting thought. Do you have weights?
Yeah. So me carrying extra load. So me carrying a weight is more load that my pelvic floor needs to manage. Doing dynamic movement is another type of load. More repetitions, more sets, that's other types of load. But we can also go directly to that group of muscles, and we can use Kegel weights. But my disclaimer is here with Kegel weights or any of the biofeedback devices that people see, like the PeriFit, we are advertised about those a lot. It's a great product. But if you have money to invest in weights or to invest in a PeriFit, it's usually somewhere between $70 to $150, maybe even $200, depending on what you're buying. Mm-hmm. Take that money and invest it in a pelvic floor physical therapist first, because understanding what your pelvic floor would benefit from is important in terms of choosing the right device. But Kegel weights, they're just like if I held a dumbbell and I lifted a heavier dumbbell every single day, well, over a span of weeks, I'm going to get stronger as a result. So Kegel weights usually come in a set of graduated weights. I really like the ones from Intimate Rose. And when you insert them, you can do Kegels with them inserted. You can do some functional movement like squats with them inserted. And now your muscles are responding not to just the movement, but also to the weight. They're having to manage that weight as well. So that can be a helpful way. I wouldn't just say start there. Nope, that's where we get to.
That's a little bit advanced strategy. Yeah. Wow. I'm 58 and I have never learned this before. So I'm so excited. I really wish I had learned it like 3 years ago for sure. Oh, that's excellent. Okay, so let's talk about nutrition. How important, nutrition is our thing. So how important is nutrition in keeping our lady parts all healthy, and all the names that we have for the big V? I mean,
totally.
I think it's it's fun, and sometimes we just need to say actually what the real word is. But go ahead. The lady V.
Yeah, so obviously I'm not shying away from the word vagina. I just say it right in there, but I have a membership called the Buff Muff, so I like a bit of fun in there as well. And in my Buff Muff membership or my community, nutrition is a huge part of it. I've got meal plans that address hormones, sleep, heart health, bone health, constipation. Like that's the biggest one I would say as it pertains to the pelvic floor, and I kind of highlighted it earlier, but so many people are constipated, and during the perimenopause transition, we may even have some thyroid issues that can influence our digestive health and how well we're pooping. And if we are not pooping every day, that's a problem. But also if we're straining to poop whenever we do poop, that is a big problem for the pelvic floor. So constipation in and of itself can contribute to sensations of urgency and incontinence. But then if we're straining to get that out, that's a lot of downward pressure that can contribute to prolapse. So incontinence is what most people associate as a pelvic floor problem, the leaking, the peasing, the sneeze pee. And that's about 30 to 40% statistically. Pelvic organ prolapse, where the bladder, the uterus, or the rectum shift out of their proper anatomical position and bulge into the vagina or descend into the vagina, as a case of the uterus, it's about 50% of women who've given birth. And again, it's not exclusive to people who've given birth. That's the statistic there. It's about 25 to 30% of people who have not given birth. And so these are big numbers. And a lot of people are dealing with these. Prolapse, sometimes early stage, is often asymptomatic, so not as many people know they have it. And then maybe after a bout of constipation or a bout of chronic coughing, or they have a heavy lifting load at work or something, all of a sudden they feel like, oh, I feel like something dropped. And that's a sign of pelvic organ prolapse. So this constant straining from constipation is hugely damaging to the pelvic floor. And that is like always a number one. Hydration and diet need to be addressed. And that might mean more fiber.
I was just going to say fiber. We have 29 to 32% of your daily fiber in every bar. And some people, that's a lot of fiber. It takes them a minute to work their way into that. But I would say fiber is our BFF. And I didn't know that it also related to a Buff Muff, but now I do.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so we need fiber. We need that from a gut health diversity perspective. We need it from a bowel movement perspective. Super important. But we also want to make sure we have the hydration to help with that increase in fiber. So that's huge. But then also looking at what sort of foods are you eating and what are you drinking that could be contributing to inflammation, and what is your sugar load? So If we have high inflammation, that is a contributor often to urgency and to painful bladder syndrome for some people, to constipation. So looking at how we can lighten our inflammation load, and also then from a sugar perspective, sugar can also be a trigger for some people. And then if we're thinking about menopause, I know for me especially, and I've heard other people say it's a major trigger for hot flashes as well.
Right.
So just
Definitely.
kind of doing a check and say, where can we make some adjustments here that will help us poop better, that will help us have more energy, that will help us sleep better, but that will also help with the symptoms of urgency and pain even sometimes for people.
Make our menopausal experience more joyful. I can only imagine the dinner conversations at your house.
Yeah.
So everybody, how's everybody pooping today?
Yeah,
I
am very guilty of that stuff.
I get to say, like, Mom, you can talk about menopause to a kindergartner. I'm like, absolutely, it's never too early.
Totally agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, you said school, right?
Yep.
Education. I'm right there with you.
Yep.
Okay, we have a fun question, Kim, as we pull all this goodness together. I'm literally going to watch this probably 3 more times myself. We say, menopause like a boss. What does that mean to you?
I used to say Kegel like a boss. I used to have a program called Birth Like a Boss. Like I embrace that because we like a boss is with confidence, with power, with purpose. And so when we have that kind of mentality pushing us forward, it gives us that purpose into what we're doing, and it gives us authority of our own bodies to go forward and make the best decisions. So that's what it means for me.
I love it. Authority of our own bodies. Absolutely. There's a whole lot we could unpack in that statement, but we need like 4 more episodes for that. Kim, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been so informative, educational, and we got show and tell, like with props and everything, which was just such a bonus. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope we can have more conversations because, tying in nutrition to our whole body health, it's not just about weight. It's not just about how we experience our symptoms. It's about our vaginas, which that is huge. I mean, that's who we are. It's not who we are, but it's a huge important part of being a woman. That Michelle on our team, we were talking about it, just about it's the ultimate self-care, to take care of the organs that mean so much to us as women. So thank you.
Totally. Yeah. I always say pelvic health is our mental health as well. So when we can remove the distraction of what's bothering us in our pelvis, everything else becomes easier.
So good. So, by the way, besides watching this 5 more times, how can people learn about what you're doing, work with you? I know you do a challenge. Tell us about that and how they can find you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, first of all, for having me and helping get the word out. So vaginacoach.com is my website, and any of the social media channels are all at Vagina Coach. So you can find me wherever you like to consume your content. And I do a 28-day challenge every month called the Buff Muff Challenge. It's where I recommend everybody start in their pelvic health journey. It lays the foundation of all we talked about here, the alignment and the posture, the breathing, the coordination, the whole body movement approach. You get some high fiber meal plans in there. So you kind of get a robust introduction to getting connected to your pelvic floor, and then you can choose from there to come into the full community and do all of the other things that I have. But that's always a really good place to start. And there's a promo right now. It's $27. That's it. So come join.
Beautiful. That's going to be the best $27 you ever spent. And if you find a woman named Joyce Gordon who's 82 stalking you, then you know it's my mom. I sent her to you.
Awesome. Amazing. My mom's in the community too. She's 77. Yeah.
I love it. Love, love, love. Thank you so much for all you do, for your courage in this conversation, making us all feel better from the inside out, from the V.
I appreciate it.
Out. Thank you so much. To be continued. Okay. Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Be well, everybody. Take care. See you next time on the MenoLounge. Bye-bye.
Bye.